Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Restomod Daisy, and we've got a video today for you. Well, you know, when you build these guns for a while and you send some off and people like them, a lot of times they'll find another gun they want built and send it right back to you. That's what's happened here. What we've got is a legacy customer who got a Restomod package gun, and he wants to take this rusty, crusty number 111 Model 40 and have the same magic worked on it. So, okay, no problem, we'll do it. Let's take the tour and see what we're working with when we get started. We'll start here at the buttstock. It's kind of unusual. If you notice, this thing has a real strong grain pattern here. Not like the normal patterns you see in poplar. I'm suspecting that this is an oak buttstock. The imprint is strong. It looks like it hasn't got a lot of age wear that you would normally see on a poplar stock. Even though it is hardwood, it's not quite as hard as oak. And we'll roll up here. She's an older gun because it's got the cast iron lever, which is really nice. And it's got the slightly larger stock bolt, which is, I'm not sure that's actually factory or not. This is appropriate. It has a small top stock screw. It also has a fixed rear sight, doesn't have the adjustable rear sight. There's no elevation adjustment on that. Then we'll roll up to the forearm. As you can see, it's dark wood. It looks kind of walnutty, you know, and you might think it is walnut until you flip it over and take a look at this side, and you realize some critters have been gnawing on that. That's a good indication that it was laying on the ground someplace, probably a barn, and various and sundry lower forms of life had a late lunch off this end of the forearm. Now, let's roll on down to the muzzle, and the unique thing about the gun when it showed up is it did not have this part, the actual cap to the bottle cap. What it had instead was a shot tube without a bottle cap. I've been playing with these guns for a long time. This is the first one I've ever seen that was a clean separation. Normally, if this part is missing, it's because it was used as a fulcrum point to try and get the shot tube screwed out of the receiver, and that normally will leave you with a very telltale curved line that wraps all the way around the tube, you know, before it gave it up. It's complete except for the fact that it's missing its bottle cap and the BB retention spring. In terms of older shot tubes, it's pretty good shape. It's got a nice tight barrel, very, very hard to see seam, and when you do the daylight test with it, you can't see any light shining in through the seam. So that probably means that it's worthwhile to fabricate or stick another shot tube from a less than desirable unit on there and get this one back up and running. In the meantime, we've got one of our new old stock units in the gun so that we can do the receiving test and see what it was running when we got our mitts on it, because there's no point in hot rodding a gun if you don't know what it was running at when you first started. Let's take a look at the receiver back here. I'm going to roll it up a little bit so you can get a really good idea of just how much crud is sitting on this steel. And it's got me a little bit antsy. When you see that kind of scale build up, you know, rust doesn't just form on top of stuff. It converts stuff that it sits on. And I'm afraid that the sidewalls of this receiver are going to be really thin. You'll notice that this one has the slightly larger nuts than what you see on the current production model. That's because it's an older gun. In terms of vintage, I don't think it's pre-war, but I think it's early post-war. Let's go ahead and do the roll stamp. Let me get the gun rotated for you, and we'll take a look at that. You can see it says Daisy Red Ryder Carbine, and as you would expect, it is in fact a Plymouth, Michigan gun. Easily discernible, easily read. Now, the gun showed up with a kind of a cool thing on it. It showed up with a warning label. I don't normally see these. See, right there. Dangerous! Fires by self! And I looked at it and dared it to fire, but it wouldn't. So I cocked it, and then it still didn't fire. So I cocked it again, and it still didn't fire. I haven't been able to replicate the issue that the owner had with it when he first got it, but what I'm thinking is that this trigger return spring, see that little springy down there? Let me get a probe so I can point that out. I think the trigger return spring is either bound up, or the sear, or, you know, rust on the trigger bolt itself. That little spring right there is the trigger return spring, and this is the back end of the trigger. So when you wiggle it, which is the field expedient test to see if it's actually running, then the gun seems to run. But you know, as I'm looking at this right now, that trigger return spring is not in the right spot. That should be, those spring loops should be on this stud, not under that stud. That might have been the problem. Because without the spring to push the trigger back, it won't engage the sear, it won't engage the plunger, and the gun can, after you lever it forward and cock it back, it can go off by itself. So that was probably a valid complaint, but it didn't give me a problem in the test firing cycle. The gun as received is as you see it. Was running, after we got the new bottle cap in it, was running around 200 feet a second average. We oiled the snot out of the shot tube and the leather seal in the compression chamber and refired, and it jumped up to about 245. So that's about what you would expect in terms of original equipment production and performance. The owner wants a jazz bow curly maple stock on it. He wants a improved power plant, new air tube, and possibly a Model 25 magazine retrofit. We'll wait and see what he thinks on that once we see what the speed differential is. Based on what the gun's doing right now, I figure she's a solid thumper, maybe a super thumper. It might be able to crack 350 once we get the process done. So that's where we're at on this particular gun today. Now we are going to showcase this gun. The next video that I do, we will disassemble the gun, inspect the internals, clean the internals, mod the internals, reinstall the internals, and we're going to try and follow every step of the process: fire bluing, fabricating a stock, getting the gun assembled, and testing for performance before we ship on this piece. And then I'm going to try and organize the 250 plus videos that I've got out into something that's a little easier for y'all to go back and look at and check and see, because even I get confused about what's where.
Okay, there are playlists. Playlists work. Look, we're not going to
I won't say that whole thing again, but we're going to work on that.
There's playlist.
So, kids, that's all we've got for you today. This is Shane Bruce with Restomod Daisy signing off.